What if I told you that most medical debt isn't valid and the hospitals know it? The truth is, they often violate the HIPAA and fail to properly itemize charges and use billing codes that don't match the treatment. Now, today I'll show you how to dispute that and potentially discharge medical debt. So make sure you stick all the way to the end so that you can learn how to remove this for good. All right. Now, before we dive into this video, this is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. Make sure to do your due diligence, even after seeing this video. A lot of times we watch these videos, get excited. And yes, it is something to get excited about, but I truly want you to learn and understand this information so that you can actually do something with it. You dig what I'm saying? So make sure you stay tapped in and do your own due diligence. You dig what I'm saying? If you're brand new, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We're specifically talking about medical debt, so make sure to stick all the way to the end because we're going to be talking about why medical debt is unlawful. We're going to be talking about the HIPAA violations. We're going to be breaking down the billing codes that they will use. And also, we're going to talk about the legal merit behind challenging medical debt. Okay? So let's dive straight in. Okay? So I want to just talk about why most medical debt is unlawful. Medical debt is unlawful simply because, number one, there typically is no valid contract signed for each service, especially if it's an ER visit. Usually we get these medical services not knowing that we're going to have a huge bill at the end. Boom, you get into an ambulance right off the bat. They taking a check, they taking some money, they're racking up your bill as soon as you get in that ambulance. And most people don't know that. Okay. Obviously, if you've gone through it a couple of times, yes, you may know it, but it's an emergency. All right. They take advantage of that. Number two, they use improper billing practices and start to bundle charges. They inflate those prices based on little fees and things of that nature that are undisclosed. Okay. And they overuse the 99285 codes, which essentially is the emergency severity upcoding. And if we break that down, so when we look at CPT code 99285, it says that this is for high complexity emergency department visits. So any time where there is when the patient's condition requires immediate life-threatening intervention. And what they'll do is they'll bundle this and it will lead to incorrect billing and potential legal issues, okay? Because if they're trying to inflate the severity of something, then they can charge you more. And this is why those medical bills be high, because they'll do these improperly. Also, at the same time, they'll add things like hidden charges from third-party vendors, labs, imaging, all these extracurricular fees that lead to the medical debt becoming unlawful because there are some contracts that they are putting you in that you have no knowledge over. Okay. So then we're going to talk about the aspect of your privacy using the Health Information Privacy Act. If I'm saying that right. Nope. It's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Okay. This primarily focuses on protecting sensitive patient health information, ensuring its confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So all that goes hand in hand with the 99285 code. And when they're not providing the proper information nor keeping it confidential, because if we really think about it, the only thing that your medical debts or any debt in general affects is your privacy, are things like your credit report. And when your credit report doesn't match what it is that you're, attempting to get as a consumer, that's when we are affected. Okay. So those HIPAA violations lack proper authorization to share or even sell your info to debt collectors. Typically, a debt collector reaches out to you about that medical debt that you didn't pay on in the last month or the last year, whatever the case may be. They take you through that debt validation process. And what's interesting is the fact that that medical debt is already discharged, right? That medical debt is already insured. Okay. Once it gets to a debt collector, it's actually charged off. Okay. So if no HIPAA compliant release was signed, then it may be an unauthorized disclosure. All right. So you should have gotten a HIPAA compliant release form. All right. That gave you the ability to choose whether or not they can disclose your information. Okay. If that typically happens, you can file a complaint directly using the HIPAA compliant with the HHS for each violation. And typically this can trigger like a settlement with the company, whether it's a debt collector or so on and so forth. But let's just break down some of the legal merit behind charging medical debt. Okay. The first things first that I want to cover is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act under the FDCPA, because the reason why we always go back to the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act is because a lot of times we don't understand that all debts are literally the same. Okay. So under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, first things first, we can go to 15 USC 1692G, the validation of debts, and it essentially breaks down and tells you that you have the right to dispute a debt and request validation. Okay. And usually they have 30 days to respond to your validation attempt. So this requires debt collectors to provide the amount of debt, the name of the creditor, and verification upon request. Now, how do you verify debt? Typically by providing things like the copy of the original itemized medical bill, right? The full billing ledger for each date of service, things like proof that you are the legal holder in due course, right? Proof that this contract that this was a valid contract, something that I had full capacity over, something I fully understood, something that wasn't unconscionable. You dig what I'm saying? And this is just a fundamental right that you have. The fact that you can validate any debt, doesn't even matter if it's a medical bill, whatever the case may be. You have a right to demand things like the accounting and all of that. Then we dive into 15 USC 1692E for false and misleading representations. Okay. This prohibits debt collectors from using false and deceptive or misleading representations, such as overstating the amount owed or failing to itemize charges. Okay, so if you ask them for the itemized charges and they don't give it to you or they ignore you, then they're in direct violation of 15 USC 1692E, because not only can they not give you false information, but they cannot mislead you or opt out of giving you information that they are required to give you. Okay, so then we dive into 15 USC 1692K, where it doesn't matter who it is, they'll be civilly liable for not respecting the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Okay? It says that in the case of any action by any individual, such additional damages as court may allow must not be exceeding $1,000, or in the case of a class action, it can exceed no more than $500,000. Long story short, any actual damage sustained by such person as a result of such failure of this subsection, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, they'll be civilly liable. Okay. Then we dive into the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. The HIPAA pretty much is broken down in 45 CFR 164.508. It's also broken down in 164.500 under applicability. And it's also even broken down in how you can complain to the secretary in 45 CFR 160.306. And all this is the legal merit behind the HIPAA or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Okay. So this one specifically says that they must use and have disclosures for, they must have valid authorization in order to release the protected health information, or in other words, the PHI. All right, to a third party like a debt collector. So if a debt collector has it, then they should be able to provide that disclosure where you signed off and said that they can give this away to a debt collector, or your information rather. Because it's not about the debt, it's about your information, which is more valuable than the debt, okay? If the debt collector is in possession with your medical billing information without a signed HIPAA authorization, that may be a privacy violation, okay? Then we also dive into the actual HIPAA privacy rule, which is 45 CFR 164.500. We dive all the way down to here. Long story short, is breaking down the regulations behind uses and disclosures of your privacy or of your private or protected health information. Typically, it's talking about if violated, a complaint can be filed to the HHS Office of Civil Rights. So you can utilize this just to understand, this is just to bring legal merit behind it. I think somebody said in my last video about something being theoretical. The thing is, I really make an attempt to make sure that my content isn't something that's theoretical, okay? I always try to bring legal merit behind it. That's why I'll show you these laws, even if it is redundant and I'm repeatedly showing you the same laws. This is for that new person that watches this video, okay? If you watch this video, you'll know and understand that there is everything I'm talking about has legal merit, all right? So then we dive into the ability to be able to go to the secretary and file a complaint for any HIPAA violations under 45 CFR 160.306. You dig what I'm saying? Get well versed in these laws so that you have confidence in actually challenging these things, because they'll come back and say, well, you can't do this. But this is where you kind of take, you kind of know in the law exactly what it is that you have the right to do. Okay. So then we dive into the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, because the reason why I like to talk about the Fair Credit Reporting Act is because that's what's really hurting us. That's what's really harming us. Okay. At the end of the day, we are discharging debt and taking a hold of these strategies so that we can position our credit report and play the game. Okay. I think that some of us will look at it and say, well, I want to discharge my debt, and they don't have no true goal behind it. Okay. They just want to discharge their debt and remove that obligation. But do you know that if you just stop paying your debt, they'll eventually charge off your debt and they will stop bothering you. Okay, yes, you may get letters from debt collectors and they may attempt to sue you. You may need to know the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. But if you just stop paying it and you send them a cease and desist and you tell them to stop reaching out to you unless they validate the debt, the worst they're going to do is put it on your credit report. So this is why we have to understand the Fair Credit Reporting Act through everything that we do on the debt discharge aspect, because under 15 U.S.C. 1681S-2, it literally talks about the responsibilities of furnishers of information as it regards to consumer reporting agencies, okay? A person shall not furnish any information relating to a consumer to any consumer reporting agency if the person knows or has reasonable cause to believe that the information is inaccurate. So as soon as you say that something is inaccurate, they must treat it as such and they must remove it off the credit reports or prove that it is accurate. But then we dive into 15 U.S.C. 1681I, where they must lay out the procedures that they took in order to verify something. They can't just send you a letter saying that something is verified. You dig me? So you have a right to dispute inaccurate information on your credit report and have it removed if it is unverifiable according to 15 U.S.C. 1681I. Let's just say they constantly ignore you and do not comply. Then we dive into civil liability for willful non-compliance, meaning you willfully just not complying. You dig what I'm saying? Any actual damages sustained by the consumer as a result of the failure, or damages not less than 100 or more than 1,000. So long story short, if you get denied, that's technically damages. That's harm, okay, for having an improper credit report. And then you dive into 15 U.S.C. 1681O, civil liability for negligent and non-compliance. You dig what I'm saying? So civil liability for willful or negligent non-compliance according to the Fair Credit Reporting Act's obligation. So if they're negligent in failing to comply and damages or harm is caused based off of that, then they can be sued. Okay? $1,000 per violation, per denial. You dig me? So that's the Fair Credit Reporting Act. The Fair Credit Reporting Act is super key to know, no matter where you're at in the process, okay? Because remember, we are discharging debt to put ourselves in a position to stop getting having bad credit reports, so that we can actually get the funding and invested in ourselves. So we don't feel like a failure because we have a low 500 credit score or below a 600 credit score. Okay? The whole point of this is to put yourself in a position where you can start building and compounding. Okay? Then we can dive into the Truth in Lending Act. The Truth in Lending Act. Okay. Under the Truth in Lending Act, 15 U.S.C. Chapter 41, Subchapter 1, Part A, General Provisions. The point of this subchapter is to break down that if they placed you under a payment plan or a finance billing agreement, this may qualify as consumer credit, which is also falls under the Truth in Lending Act. Okay. So they must make clear disclosures about interest rates, terms, and your rights, especially if they're going to contract with you, especially if they're going to give you a payment plan. You dig what I'm saying? So even on here, it says that the informed use of credit results from awareness of the cost thereof by consumers. It is the purpose of this subchapter to assure a meaningful disclosure of credit terms so that the consumer will be able to compare more readily the various credit terms available to him and avoid the uninformed use of credit, and to protect the consumer against inaccurate or unfair credit billing and credit card practices. All right. So that's the Truth in Lending Act. Then we dive into the UCC. The UCC also protects you for medical billing and things of that nature that, you know, the common public won't talk about. So if we do UCC 3-501, UCC 3-501 essentially allows you to demand presentment, identification, and or proof of obligation. All right. That's UCC 3-501, breaks down what a presentment is. Means a demand made by or on behalf of a person entitled to enforce the instrument. Okay. So when you do a presentment, that right there is an order. Okay. That's a contract being created. Then we dive into UCC 9-210, which essentially allows you to request for accounting requests regarding a list of collateral or statement. Okay. You have a right to demand accounting of an obligation secured by collateral. Medical bills being sold to debt buyers falls under this category. Okay. So these are the rights that you're supposed to know and understand. It's so many things. Okay. We can even talk about the CPT, which is the current procedural terminology, or the ICD-10, that, long story short, hospitals and providers are required to bill according to standardized medical codes that match diagnosis and treatment. So when we talk about what they typically would do is they'll make it seem like it's more severe than what it actually is, and they're able to charge you more. Upcoding, bundling, or using mismatched ICD-10 or CPT codes is a form of billing fraud and is challengeable. So if you feel like the bill is much higher than what it should be, right? Getting well versed in some of these medical billing code requirements is going to be super key to challenging that medical debt. Okay. The way you would challenge any debt is not a loophole. It's not you coming up with some level of conspiracy. It's you understanding the law so that you can be able to communicate to that debt collector whether or not they have legal standing or whether they are within their rights to collect on the debt, whether that debt is actually verifiable or valid. That's why we do what we do. This is why we challenge them. Okay. And if you've gotten this far, 20 minutes in, go ahead, click the like button, click the subscribe button, because we still have a lot of information to get into. And again, if you've gotten this far, you are a real one. All right. I'm going to make sure I have a treat for you guys at the end so that you guys can be able to, understand how to be able to attack this. All right. So when you break down those billing codes, you can request a full medical bill, an itemized statement. OK, and you can even request a UB04 form. And again, you can look that up. You can look for those mismatch ICD codes, Some of the red flags that you may encounter are the code doesn't match the diagnosis, upcoding to inflate prices, or even double billing, which is another form of billing fraud. So let's just talk about how to challenge citing using the HIPAA and medical coding errors, okay? So you use a debt validation letter, okay, and you want to cite the HIPAA codes and any of the medical codes or whatever the case may be. You want to dispute with the credit bureaus, citing those Fair Credit Reporting Act inaccuracies. You then want to file a complaint with the CFPB and the Office for Civil Rights, and you want to use UCC arguments if they securitize the debt. So if they ended up selling that contract to someone else, then they lose that holder in due course. This is why we ask them simple questions like, hey, did you guys securitize this loan? Did you guys securitize this agreement? Okay. So if I show you guys a quick debt validation letter. So when we look at this debt validation letter, specifically talking about medical billing, this is what that debt validation letter would look like. Okay. Now, obviously you can just review this, take a picture, whatever the case may be, but this is also in the complete debt guide. I'll make sure that this is in a complete debt guide so that you guys can be able to review it, see it, and use it for educational purposes only. But we're going to go through this relatively quickly. All right. So obviously address it properly, demand for validation and verification of alleged medical debt. This letter is a formal demand for validation and verification of the alleged debt you claim I owe in accordance with my rights under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, 15 U.S.C. 1692G, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and the HIPAA Privacy Act, okay? I'm not refusing to pay, but I'm requesting that you validate the following: the full accounting and contracts, a copy of the original itemized bill, a full billing ledger, the signed contract for or agreement, the ICD-10 and the CPT codes, HIPAA compliance authorization, valid HIPAA authorization form with my signature permitting you or the debt collector to share my private medical information. If no such authorization exists, your possession or transmission of my protected health information may be in violation of 45 CFR 164.508. Truthful and accurate reporting. If this debt is being reported to any consumer reporting agency, provide proof that all information furnished is complete, accurate, and not misleading. The name and address of each credit bureau. Okay. Please be advised, if you fail to provide the above within 30 days or continue collection activities without properly validating this debt, you'll be construed as willful violation of FDCPA, Fair Credit Reporting Act, and possibly HIPAA, and I will consider pursuing these remedies under 15 U.S.C. 1692K, 1681N&O, and HIPAA, which is 45 CFR 160.306. Okay? So when you look at this, you understand that not only am I breaking down exactly what I need them to do, what would be considered verification on my end, but also if they do not comply, I'm already going to assume that you are being negligent or that you are under willful violation. And I will pursue these under civil liability, and I will file a complaint with the proper channels because I have a right to. This is why it's important to be able to understand how to be able to communicate with debt collectors, understanding that communication in written form is more important than going and complaining about what it is that you owe or whatever the case may be. Okay? Because it's not even about that. We want you to comply in operation with the law and what the law allows you to do. Okay? And what your obligations are. Now we're not even having a conversation about me owing you something. Now it's a conversation about whether you are doing within your duty. You dig what I'm saying? So just to close this out. All right. Medical debt is one of the biggest scams in the system because it plays on fear. Think, hey, if I don't pay this or if this happens, I may not ever be able to be treated again. But I want you guys to understand that knowledge changes everything. If you know the knowledge, you can be able to challenge debt collectors, medical bills, loans, the IRS, whatever the case may be. This is not tax or financial advice. But if you're tired of those collection calls, if you're tired of the unfair bills, then it's time to really fight back the legal way. Understand the legal merit behind challenging debt collectors, not only on the aspect of, okay, I'm going to challenge these collection agencies, but I'm going to be able to challenge these medical companies, these financial institutions that have been taking advantage of me. If you guys understand this, you guys learn this, then you too will be able to be closer to financial freedom, not because your debt is completely wiped away, but now you understand how to communicate with some of those financial powers that keep us from reaching financial freedom. Okay? Because I'll tell you right now that wealthy people are not just paying debts just willy-nilly. And I'm not against paying debts. Pay your debts. You dig what I'm saying? But it's more in the aspect of not being taken advantage of and not being controlled by debt so that you can feel flexible. See, I'm not worried about debt, not because I won't pay it or whatever the case may be, because I will pay debts that I feel like I want and need to pay. Okay? But if there's debts that I really don't want to, if I understand that my debt is charged off, or if I get in a position where I can't pay a debt, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to stress. I'm not going to sweat. Okay? So if you gotten this far, thank you for watching the video. Remember down below, if you want to get that debt validation letter and any other letters that in regards to debt discharge or consumer law, tap in with the complete debt guide. The information is in there, not only the instructional aspect, but also the aspect of you being able to see the templates, and those are very educational. It's not for you to just use, it's more educational. Number two, if you want to work with me one-on-one, specifically on fixing your credit, getting funding, and or starting your own credit repair business, tap in with the one-on-one mentorship. The link will be in the description. Number three, tap in with me on Instagram at biz.nick. Tap in with me on Twitch at biz_nick. Tap into the free Discord. The link will be in the description. Tap in so that you can get an update every time I post a video and you never miss a video. If you've gotten this far, remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on those post notifications so that you get an update every time I post a video. And lastly, if you got this far, comment the word discharge, and I'll see you in the next one.